Ground, Saturday, June 10, 1967, for the first test between Australia and New Zealand. It's a very wet and a very cold day in Sydney, but despite the overcast conditions, there's a crowd already around about the 27,000 mark at the Sydney Cricket Ground, and this is a little bit disappointing, but we can blame the wet weather for the rather dismal crowd today. But the match won't be dismal. Last week we saw New Zealand defeat New South Wales by 1 point, and today New Zealand is putting onto the field the same side Australia is putting on an entirely different side. We'll see the greats of Australian Rugby League today: Wedge, Gasnier, Langlands, Irvine, Smith and Raper. And the great New Zealand side, a little bit untried by international standards, but led by a very capable lock forward in Bruce Castle. They're just about ready to go now, the first test between Australia and New Zealand at the Sydney Cricket Ground, Saturday, June 10, 1967. And Australia will be running left to right in the first half, and there's the kick-off, a fairly deep one to New Zealand territory. Let's see what they can do with it. Rushing back for is the halfback Irvine. Goes past Tuddy, well put down, good diving tackle by Thompson. They're about 20 yards out from the New Zealand line. The referee today is Mr. Cole Pearce. Touch judges, Mrs. R. Freeman and C. Hudson. New Zealand still in possession. You can see the very tight and rugged tackling by the Australian side. Good clearing kick that time by Tatana that bounces the wrong way. Going back for it is Gasnier, Australian captain coach. Swings it to Smith, looking towards Irvine's wing, but he's well put down. Good diving tackle that time by Christian. Goes from Greaves, Thompson, the headgear, running back the other way. Gets rid of it too. Finds Greaves, goes back the other way and finds this time little Gleeson going through, the Australian 5'8". They're just outside the New Zealand 25. Fitzsimmons feeding it to Raper. Greaves going for the line hard. He's got Irvine outside if he can get a pass clear, but he's put down. Plays it to Thompson. Close to the New Zealand line. Smith, Gleeson. Langland's coming up from the fullback position. There's a gap coming up and he's going hard for the line, but put down about, no more than 1 yard short. New Zealand in a lot of trouble, but of course that was the fourth tackle against Australia and a desperate effort by Graham Langlands, the Australian fullback. The first scrum of the match going down about 4 or 5 yards out, of course, from the New Zealand line. Put in by Irvine for New Zealand, and looks like being a New Zealand ball, but it's locked in the scrum. A penalty, first penalty of the match to New Zealand. Good chance for them to clear their line because Australia looked pretty promising in the opening minutes. The ball being thrown over to Roger Tate, the New Zealand fullback, number 1. He'll be kicking over towards the scoreboard touchline. Fair sort of a kick, raises the flag just short of the 25. With the ball at the moment is O'Neill, the New Zealand hooker. Their forwards now will try and test the Australian defence. Going down with it is Dixon, New Zealand's second rower. Played away well this time to Bruce Castle, New Zealand captain, flipping it out there, but a bad one, and after it there was Hannigan loose on the ground, picked up eventually by Tate, the New Zealand fullback, and New Zealand still in possession, but only about 20 yards out from their own line. Goes back to Castle there, he's kicked, but it doesn't go anywhere near touch. Goes back to Langlands, the Australian fullback. They're about 40 yards out. He'll get up and play it to Australian halfback Billy Smith. Raper. Straight through the New Zealand forwards, and play coming dangerously close now to the New Zealand 25. Kelly, the dummy half, getting it to Smith. Inside, loose ball, and going up for Tutty, who I think might have knocked it on, but no. Mr. Pearce says that's quite okay. Last tackle coming up for Australia. Raper to Thompson. Oh, good pass there to Gleeson, then Irvine. Irvine must go in for Australia, and Irvine puts it down beautifully about 5 yards to the right of the post. First blood to Australia, and after 2.5 minutes play in the first half, it's Australia 3, New Zealand 0, with the kick to come. Good enterprising football by Australia that caught New Zealand by surprise. The first break made by Johnny Raper, who set up Gleeson, and Gleeson, the 5'8", went through beautifully. Irvine backed up well after Thompson came through in support, and Irvine took the final pass from Thompson, the very nuggety Australian second rower from Newcastle, and Irvine has touched down about 5 yards to the right of the posts and has left a fairly easy kick for Graham Langlands, the Australian fullback, placing the ball now, and has only taken it back about 15 yards. Australia 3, New Zealand 0, as Langlands comes in to try and convert Irvine's try. The flags are up, and so Australia goes to a lead of 5 points to 0 after 4.5 minutes play in the first half. Play now to recommence with the kick from the halfway line. You'll notice the fairly slippery patch of mud. That's the cricket pitch area of the Sydney cricket ground. But other than that, the playing condition of the Sydney cricket ground is exceptionally good, as Sydney has had a lot of rain in the 7 or 8 days prior to this first test, as the kick-off now being taken by Elwood for New Zealand. Goes to Gasnier, takes it about 15 yards out, kicks and probably go through for it. Tate rushing back for it. What a beautiful kick that I think will find the line. No, Tate gets to it first. He's just inside his own 25. Decides to kick himself. Goes to Langlands, almost collided with Smith, but Langlands with the ball. The Australian fullback puts his boot to it. New Zealand now in possession, but on their own 25. Good, clever, quick defence there by Australia. The Australian defence, which was lacking last week, at least in the New South Wales side against New Zealand, is very evident today. Going through with the ball is Oscar Danielson. He's brought it out about 30 yards. Marked by Kelly. Is playing the ball to O'Neill, the New Zealand hooker. Goes out well across that time to Snell, running across field and well tackled by Raper. Last tackle against New Zealand, and the scrum to go down about 35 to 36 yards out from the New Zealand line. With the ball at the moment is Irvine, number 7. Smith, as you can see, wants the ball, and eventually he gets it, but he's not too happy with Bob Irvine, the New Zealand hooker. Looks like being an Australian. No, bounced off a prop leg, but play continues. Smith in possession. Mr. Pearce had blown his whistle. Play is not continuing. Third attempt to get the ball into the scrum, and Smith has it for Australia. This time an Australian ball to Gleeson. Greaves. Gasnier outside him. Goes past Gasnier. Picked up by Hannigan. Back to Gasnier. Slips as he tries to go through. Put down well. A good tackle that time by White to stop him. Comes to Raper. Famous Australian lock, just carving a path through the New Zealand pack. Play 35 yards out from the New Zealand line as it goes to Smith. New Zealand now creeping up inside the 5, and a penalty to Australia. This one being awarded about 6 or 7 yards to the right of the uprights. An excellent opportunity for Graham Langlands, who so far has had one shot at goal. That was the conversion of Ken Irvine's try after 3 or 4 minutes play. And this one is in a reasonably easy spot for a kicker like Graham Langlands. The breeze is fairly light, and if anything is blowing, Langlands faces this one. The 25-yard line just a few yards in front of him, so it's no more than 30 yards out. Clock showing about 8 minutes gone in the first half, with Australia leading New Zealand 5 points to 0 after a try by Irvine and a goal by Langlands. And Langlands now coming in for his second shot at goal. Getting a little bit of a clap from the crowd because he is taking a reasonable amount of time. Now he's happy. Langlands, a member of the famous St George rugby league team in Sydney, puts his boot to it, took a bit of turf, and it's gone to the left of the post, out over the dead ball line. No points for that one. The score remains at Australia 5, New Zealand 0, and a 25 dropout now coming up for New Zealand. With the ball is Tate, the New Zealand fullback, throwing it over there to Elwood, the 5'8". Elwood now kicking off over towards the scoreboard touchline. There's his kick. Taken by Raper. Dummies, tries to go straight down the centre, put down in the mud patch, just a yard or so inside the Australian half. Gasnier, of all people, the dummy half. Flips it to Kelly. Kelly having his first game, or his second game rather, as he gets it away to Smith after about 2 months on the injured list. Smith, the Australian halfback in possession. Playing it to Fitzsimmons, the hooker from Queensland. Raper back inside there, finds Thompson, but Thompson has crash tackled, lost the ball too, and picked up well. New Zealand in possession, a bit of a bounce that goes behind them. Rather scrappy play now. Tuddy gets it for Australia, the blonde-headed second rower, but a couple of knock-ons, and so we'll have a scrum pack down as one of the Australian players. That's Kelly, I think. No, it's not Kelly. We'll pick him up in just a moment, but as he gets to his feet, the scrum will go down after this player receives first aid treatment. It's very difficult to tell just which player it is at the moment. Could be Thompson, the second rower from Newcastle. He's the player in headgear, and we can't see anyone standing around in headgear. It could be Thompson. You remember he was crash tackled head on. One play the ball before Mr. Pearce signalled the knock on for the scrum to go down. Apparently a little bit knocked about. Getting to his feet now, helped up by Langlands, number 1, and Raper. And decides you'll go back into the pack, number 10. That's the player. Alan Thompson from Newcastle, second rower. Obviously very severely knocked about and is still very groggy on his feet, helped to his position there by Johnny Raper, the Australian lock number 8, and has gone into the second row with Dennis Tuddy. It's a New Zealand bull, goes to Elwood. Then out well to Bailey, trying to carve his passage through. Number 3, put down well by opposition man Gasnier. New Zealand tries the short kick this time. It's over Irvine's head. It beats him into touch too, and the flag goes up midway between the Australian 25 and the halfway line. The scrum to go down on that spot. Good shot of the pack going in now. 2 opposing hookers, Fitzsimmons for Australia and O'Neill for New Zealand. Put in by Smith for Australia, and Australian ball out to Gleeson. Tries to beat Elwood. Couldn't quite get his pass away there to Smith backing up. He'll play it to Raper. Tutty, blonde-headed player, getting it for the first time really in this match and running across field, making his first appearance for Australia today. Smith feeds it back the other way and finds Kelly trying to crash his way through, but ran hard and straight then into Snell. And a bit of a struggle going on for the ball. Kelly playing it, last tackle coming up for Australia. Goes to Gleeson, tries the short kick. It'll go back to Tate, the New Zealand fullback, just outside his own 25. There's his kick. It'll go back to Langlands, lets it bounce, makes sure of it, just inside his own 25. Kicks centre field this time. One Australian player up there is Raper, but of course he's in an offside position as it goes through this time to Baker, the New Zealand winger, and he's through. Comes here to Greaves. Greaves gets him beautifully and puts him down just inside the Australian half. Comes to Irvine, trying to barge his way through, but he's a bit small for that sort of stuff. And the ball has been stolen from him beautifully by Gleeson. He's going through all on his own, but runs into a lot of high tackling there, eventually tackled by O'Neill, the New Zealand hooker. Australia a little bit slow to get up. Irvine to Fitzsimmons, Smith, Greaves. Dummies towards Gasnier, still going, but he's caught and put down beautifully by Snell. They're 35 yards out from the New Zealand line. Fitzsimmons back across that time to Thompson, to Kelly. Running very hard across field, trying to bump off New Zealand tacklers, but put down well, and last tackle coming up for Australia. Gleeson feeds it to Raper. Kicks for the line, but it goes straight that time to Baker on the wing. Tries to get around Raper, but Raper comes through, puts him down just outside the New Zealand 25, but New Zealand in possession again. Got away well that time by O'Neill. Going through with it this time is Castle, the New Zealand lock. The dummy half will be Colin O'Neill. Just outside the New Zealand 25. Good pass that time that goes via Snell and looking for the back line, but good crash tackling by Australia, that time by Tutty. Play 35 to 36 yards out from the New Zealand line. Good pass away by Dixon. Finds this time Danielson going through. All bad passing there by New Zealand. Raper scoops it away to Greaves. Greaves is caught by Castle, number 13. We'll play it back here to Fitzsimmons. Looks for support, finds this time going through with it Gallagher, coming into the match really for the first time so far. He'll get up and play it to Kelly. They're only 15 yards out from the New Zealand line as it goes to Greaves. But Gleeson outside him. Gleeson comes inside, eventually gets it to Fitzsimmons, jumping players as he goes through. They're going across field Australia, not really making any forward progress. Comes to Raper. Smith. Tuddy outside him. Goes past Tuddy and finds Langlands. He's got Irvine outside, but he decides to go on his own. And he's put down about 5 yards short. And Mr. Pearce now is calling out one of the New Zealand players. It's Ted Baker, number 5, the winger, who threw a pretty high sort of a tackle there. Or rather, I suppose you could describe it as a stiff arm. Luckily, it didn't connect because Langlands had his head ducked, but he is being cautioned. And it'll be interesting to see whether Mr. Pearce awards a caution and just lets it go at that, or at least awards a penalty. Oscar Danielson, actually, number 8, is the player that was spoken to. It was not Ted Baker. Danielson, and a penalty to Australia. It's been granted about 10 or 11 yards out from the New Zealand line, and Graham Langlands, number 1, has taken it back to the New Zealand 25. He's 10 yards in from touch, and as he prepares himself for his third attempt at goal, he's already landed 1, had 1 miss. The score as he prepares himself is Australia 5, New Zealand 0. Play now about 12 and a half minutes old in the first half. Langlands in the air, doesn't look too bad, and the flags are up, and Australia goes further ahead and leads New Zealand 7 points to 0 after almost 13 minutes play in the first half. It was Graham Langland's second goal from 3 attempts. Well, so far play has been restricted to the New Zealand half. And New Zealand not quite the force we saw last week when they defeated a very strong New South Wales side. There's the kick-off by 5'8" Elwood. Goes to Hannigan, the Australian winger, running it out about 15, 20 yards. Well taken. He was marked anyways by Colin O'Neill, the New Zealand hooker. So the dummy half, it's Smith, the Australian halfback. No support, but now he does find support and gets it to Gleeson. Gleeson running over towards the scoreboard touchline. Good diving tackle by Snell. Puts him down, almost into touch. They're about 40 yards out from the Australian line. Comes to Gasnier. Thought he might kick for a moment, but he's well put down and marked anyway by Irvine, who was coming across. That's Bob Irvine, of course, in cover defence. Fitzsimmons gets a long one back. Langlands with a long, long kick, looking for the line, but it doesn't go anywhere near it. Taken well this time by Tate, the fullback for New Zealand. Runs into Gasnier, and they put down there by Gasnier and Raper, midway between the New Zealand 25 and the halfway line. New Zealand hemmed in. They're trying to kick an awful lot as it goes to Langlands. Juggling the ball about 35 yards out from his own line. A crossfield taken there by Bob Irvine and put down. Good anticipation by Irvine. Played to Smith. Raper to Greaves. New Zealand, the Australian centre, partner today for Reg Gasnier, has brought play about 5 yards inside the New Zealand half. Smith, Kelly. Big burly front rower for Australia. To Fitzsimmons, lightweight Australian hooker from Queensland, has brought play about 7 yards inside the New Zealand half. Played away by Gallagher to Raper, to Gleeson. Finds a bit of a gap, but he's dived that. Over to Hannigan. Hannigan's got a perfect go for the line here. Tate dives at him, but he beats Tate effortlessly and dives in. And Hannigan's in for his first try ever for Australia. This is also his first test match for Australia. And so in something like 15 minutes of play in his first test match appearance for Australia, Les Hannigan, who last year played for a country side and this year came up to the Sydney Manly Warringah side, has gone in for a try. And it's interesting to note that both tries scored so far by Australia have come from the wingers. The first one scored by veteran test man Ken Irvine, and that last one by Les Hannigan, who ran, let's go back a little bit, a good 45 yards after a good breakthrough by Johnny Gleeson, the Australian 5'8". Australia now goes to a lead of 10 points to nil over New Zealand, and we still have the kick to come from fullback Graham Langlands. A great cheer goes up for Les Hannigan, who is not a very big winger. He wouldn't go much more, I suppose, than 11.5 stone at the very outside, but a very speedy professional sprinter from the South Coast Club, who this year was brought up by the Manly Warringah Rugby League Club, and so far has been a tower of strength in Sydney Rugby League. And that try has now stamped him as an almost certain candidate for tests for Kangaroo selection. There's the kick, which goes sadly to the left of the posts, and the scores remain at Australia 10, New Zealand 0. And we've got 17 minutes only played in the first half, so New Zealand really will have to start pulling something out of the fire. They can't blame the wind. There's no wind to run into or with at this stage of the game. The field is a little bit slippery, but the mud patch, if anything, is more in Australia's half than New Zealand's. Elwood, the New Zealand 5'8", has placed the ball, kicking over towards the scoreboard touchline. A grubber kick that goes behind Kelly. Loose on the ground, everybody wants it. I think eventually picked up there by Tatana, but Mr. Pearce has ruled the knock on, and we'll have a scrum packed down now midway between the Australian 25 and the halfway line. As the scrums go down, Australia has won 2-1 so far over New Zealand. And a penalty to New Zealand, this time Australia pushing New Zealand off the mark. Could be interesting. Tate is coming up. It's not that far out, only midway between the Australian 25 and the halfway line. This will be the first attempted goal by anybody in the New Zealand side, and Roger Tate, the New Zealand fullback number 1, is placing this one. It's about 15 yards or so in from touch. Not a great deal of an angle and no breeze to worry about, but already the ball, of course, would be getting a little bit heavy. Taking his time about it. There's a long, long way to go in this first test match at the Sydney Cricket Ground, although Australia do have a rather large lead of 10 points to nil over New Zealand with only 18 minutes gone in the first half, but 2 points now could put New Zealand back into some sort of fighting spirit. They so far haven't clicked at all. Tate ready. Could be 2 points in the air, dropping a little bit short, but it's not too bad, but it goes to the left of the posts. Bad luck, no points for that one as the ball goes out to Smith, the Australian halfback, and he's got Greaves inside, Irvine outside, dummies. Bad move, I think, but gets it away beautifully there to Gleeson. Gleeson gets it back to Smith, tackled by Roger Tate, 6 yards inside the New Zealand half. It's all Australia. Raper, Tutty, number 9, clapping on the pace now, tries to go inside, gets it away beautifully to Gasnier. Hannigan again now, down the scoreboard, touchline flying, tries to go around Tate, no support, he'll be pushed into touch, and he is into touch about 10 yards short of the New Zealand line. Good, excellent in fact, backline football by Australia as it went from Tutty to Gasnier to Hannigan. The scrum going down, only about 10 yards out from the New Zealand line, put in by Irvine, an Australian ball, Smith to Gleeson, Gasnier, Langland's up as extra man, but he's out of position. Gasnier is going to be put down about 20 yards out. Raper, the dummy half, tries the other side of the field, then dummies and goes back to the other side of the field again, but put down about 12 yards out. It's an excellent spot for a field goal. Fitzsimmons to Smith. To Gallagher, running very hard for the corner, but coming in for the tackle, number 13, Castle helps put him down. Australia still swinging about. Smith, dummies, tries to go through, put down that time by Dixon. They're about 20 yards out, and last tackle coming up for Australia. Kelly, here's the field goal attempt. Oh, a bad one along the ground. Will go to Tate, the New Zealand fullback. Had a lot of work to do today. Comes to Gallagher, and will put down about 12 yards out from the New Zealand line. This is little Irvine going through with it. The New Zealand halfback crash tackled, made up about 5 yards. And being called out for Australia is Noel Kelly for a little bit of rough stuff, swinging arm as Irvine was being put down. There's almost certain to be a penalty, and there it is to New Zealand. Good chance for them now to clear the line. Noel Kelly, a renowned tough man of rugby league, asks and gives no quarter. And that time he was making sure that little Irvine made no more forward progress. There's the kick, which has raised the flag about 35 yards out. Tap penalty for New Zealand. It'll go to Castle. A good dummy back the other way. New Zealand starting to go through a little bit. That time going through was Dixon. But just watch the Australian defence come up, because they're moving up so well. New Zealand's becoming a little bit rattled. Going through with it, White, the New Zealand centre. Going through it at this time is Danielson. Gets his pass away beautifully to Baker. Baker's down the touch line, but he's pushed into touch. Good diving tackle by Billy Smith, and the flag has gone up about 35 yards out from the Australian line. Even though New Zealand made a break, the Australian cover defence again a little bit too strong and a little bit too quick. With the ball is Billy Smith, number 7, the Australian halfback, but it's a New Zealand ball as it goes to Wellwood and back then to Irvine. A long, long one over there that finds in the centre, Bailey looking towards his winger over there and finds him, Christian, going for the line, ball right up in the air, and an intercept by Australia. Greaves has got it, stumbling through, and has brought play just outside the Australian 25. Bad luck for New Zealand. Tutty with the ball. This is Thompson going through, number 10 for Australia, second rower. Fitzsimmons, the Australian hooker, feeds it to Smith. Well dragged down, and New Zealand now getting a little bit more enterprising in their defence and moving up much more quickly. Back it goes for a clearing kick to Langlands, but it won't go anywhere near the touchline. Racing across for it is Tate, the fullback, takes it just outside his own 25, running over towards Christian's wing, but decides to kick. It'll find touch too, about 35 yards out from the Australian line, and the scrum to go down on that spot. As the scrum goes down, not a great deal in the scrums. Australia has won the scrum so far 3-2 over New Zealand. Put in by Smith for Australia, but it's a New Zealand ball to Elwood. Out that time to Bailey, a dummy back to Elwood. He's lost the ball and dived on by Gasnier for Australia, midway between the Australian 25 and the halfway. Raper to Thompson. Greaves. Greaves has got Irvine if he works towards the wing, but he's well taken, and coming in for the tackle, number 4, White, help puts him down. Played to Gallagher. Smith, Gleeson, Tutty. Running on his own and flips it to Hannigan. He was knocked down as he went for the ball. It's sure to be a knock on, and Mr. Pearce has blown his whistle for it. No, New Zealand has regained, so they got it from Australia's knock on, and New Zealand still in possession now, trying to run their way through. A brought play up just outside the Australian 25, and again Kelly in for a smashing sort of a tackle. New Zealand throwing it about a great deal, and this time getting a penalty for Australia creeping up inside the 5, but not over impressive, and so far their backs seem a little bit bogged down in the mud. Could be 2 points coming up. So far for New Zealand, Tate has had 2 shots at goal, and so far of course has landed none. This will be his 3rd attempt, and this one he's placing no more than 30 yards out from the Australian line, and it's centre field. It's an excellent opportunity And New Zealand certainly need a couple of points because the clock shows 23 minutes gone in the first half, with Australia leading New Zealand 10 points to nil. And for Australia, the tries have come from the two wingers, Irvine and Hannigan, and 2 goals have been kicked by Graham Langlands. Tate ready now. And a good elevation on the ball, and this is a relatively simple kick. Taking his time, now he's ready in the air, and it's straight between the posts. 2 points to New Zealand, and now they've slightly bridged the gap, but Australia still very comfortably ahead. Australia 10, New Zealand 2, after 24 minutes play in the first half. Australia to recommence with the kick from the halfway line, and with the ball is Billy Smith. Very nippy little Australian halfback. Last year voted Australian Footballer of the Year. Coming through, though, is Graham Langlands. A long one that again will go to Tate. He takes it just outside his own line. Might kick, and there goes the kick. Looking for touch over Irvine's head, the winger. Irvine will get to it. Lets it bounce once. Takes it on the halfway line. Trying to run through on his own. Beats one man, still going, and eventually he'll be slammed down by White, number 4, and not quite dragged into touch, and has his jumper pulled up for extra measure. Goes to Fitzsimmons, the Australian hooker, and tackled by Snell. Playing it to Smith. Midway between the New Zealand 25 and the halfway line to Gleeson, who's dropped it in front of him, surely. Mr. Pearce has blown his whistle, and so we'll have a scrum packed down about 6 or 7 yards inside the New Zealand half in centre field, pretty well right in the middle of the famous Bulleye mud patch. Scrum to be fed by Irvine for New Zealand, coming around with the ball. And it's bounced straight out Australia to New Zealand's way, but of course a penalty to Australia, that time obviously against Irvine. It's a fair way out, and unfortunately right in the middle of the mud, and so I doubt whether Langlands will be interested in goal. We'll see in a moment. With the ball at the moment is number 7, Billy Smith, throwing it to Langlands, and Langlands, of course, now will just look for touch. It'll be a very difficult kick from the mud. There's his kick, which has raised the flag right on the New Zealand 25, and so we'll have a tap penalty here, and with the ball is Ken Irvine. Straight through the centre of the New Zealand ruck, and last week we saw exactly the reverse happening when New Zealand went straight through the New South Wales ruck. Out to Gasnier. Oh, loses the ball there badly, but it goes to Gasnier. Went in front of Gasnier in the first place, and so for the knock-on we'll have a scrum packed down midway between the New Zealand 25 and the halfway line. About 14 minutes to go to half-time, with Australia leading New Zealand 10 points to 2. With the ball is Bob Irvine for New Zealand, the halfback. And he got it all right, but dived on by Smith, but it didn't get into the scrum at all cleanly. Mr. Pearce, the referee, calls for it to go in again. Scrum a little bit wild and woolly in there. This time it gets in pretty well, and it's a New Zealand ball. Irvine clips a beautiful pass there to Woolwood, and then back over to winger Baker, who stumbled about 10 yards short of the halfway line. Irvine across that time to Castle, gets it away beautifully to Snell, running very hard, gets a pass along the ground that's picked up eventually by O'Neill, and a lot of rough stuff going on at the moment with Kelly again in the forefront. New Zealand, though, still in possession. Castle going through with it, brings play just over the Australian halfway line, about 3 or 4 yards inside the Australian half. Tutty is marking Castle as he plays that ball. There's the kick by Danielson. It goes, oh, and an intercept beautifully over there by Christian, and he must go in for a try for New Zealand. Oh, and puts it down magnificently. There's 3 points for New Zealand. And you saw that happening all the way as the kick from Danielson went up into the air over towards Hennigan's wing. Hennigan got underneath it all right, but he misjudged the drop of the ball, and New Zealand's Footballer of the Year last season, Roy Christian, came flying through and took it beautifully Australian rules fashion, and of course the Australian cover defence just wasn't in the event of getting him, and so New Zealand come back dramatically now into the fight with the score at the moment, Australia 10, New Zealand 5 after that try by Christian, and the kick to convert Christian's try to come. If they get this one, of course, Tate will have the shot at goal. The score will go along to Australia 10, New Zealand 7, and that puts it in an entirely different complexion on the ground, the game. Christian getting a well-deserved clap and a cheer from this crowd at the Sydney Cricket Ground that by now is swollen to around about the 28,000 to 30,000 mark at least. It's a shame that the weather hasn't been more kind in Sydney, because I'm sure this game could have drawn upwards of 40,000 people. Tate now is ready. He's placed this one just inside the Australian 25. As he comes in, it's Australia 10, New Zealand 5. In the air, not a bad sort of a kick. And the flags are up, and so New Zealand now right back into the fight. Only 3 points the difference. Australia 10, New Zealand 7. Now there's one try between them. And also interesting to note, in the meantime, that one of the New Zealand players has been receiving first aid treatment. Referee Cole Pearce going over to make sure that he can continue in the game. Time up. In the meantime, it's to the right of the screen, Oscar Daniel. A little bit of massage and water treatment. Could be a little bit of mud in the eye, perhaps, the New Zealand player being treated, because there is quite a deal of mud and slush on the ground. But now everything in readiness to recommence. With the score as Australia prepares to kick off. Australia leading New Zealand by 3 points, 10-7. There's the kick by Langlands. Oh, was it a knock-on? Everybody called in the corner, but it wasn't. And so New Zealand continues on, and a lot of wild and woolly over-the-head stuff by Australia in defence. Tutty coming in now and getting that man loose on the ground. Going for it was Dixon. It looks as though Australia might have regained. No, he's called for the knock-on, and players getting a little bit heated in there, unfortunately. The game, of course, is a little bit too young for things to start happening. Only 10 minutes to go to half-time as this scrum goes down, and Bob Irvine defeated for New Zealand. An Australian ball if Smith gets to it. Look at that New Zealand player offside, and he's caught him. And Mr. Pearce rushes around the scrum faster than most of the halfbacks we have in Sydney. Calls for the offside play, and a penalty to Australia awarded only about 12 yards out. Langlands has taken it back, as you can see now, to just inside the New Zealand 25. This will be his 5th attempt at goal. He's landed 2. This one is a fairly acute angle. It's about 12, 13 yards in from touch. And perhaps he could have taken it back just a little bit further. Get a slightly wider view of the post, but he seems quite happy. No breeze to worry about, but the ball obviously very slippery and getting a little bit heavy, even though we've had only 30 minutes play in the first half. There's the kick by Langlands, took a bit of the turf with him, and it's gone badly to the left, picked up by Tate, the New Zealand fullback. You'll have to hurry. Thompson gets him and grounds him just outside his own line, almost grounded the ball in his own line. Goes back that time for a clearing kick for New Zealand. Could be danger. Goes this time to Gasnier. Gasnier's got Irvine outside, but he goes for the line himself, and he must go in. And there's a magnificent try as only Rex Gasnier can score them for Australia. Beautiful anticipation. Caught New Zealand completely out of position, and now Australia go further ahead and lead New Zealand 13 points to 7. The last try scored by Reg Gasnier. And isn't it interesting to note that despite the fact that the field is a little bit on the heavy side and we have a mud patch in the middle, and we've read so much newspaper talk about the game becoming a forward battle, that every time we've seen 4 scored so far have been scored by the backs. For Australia, the last try scored by the great Reg Gasnier, captain and coach of this Australian side, and the previous 2 for Australia scored by the 2 wingers, Irvine and Hannigan, and the sole New Zealand try scored by their right winger, Roy Christian. Australia 13, New Zealand 7. The match far from over, because New Zealand have been a little bit slow and lethargic, and I'm sure they can play better rugby league than this. Now they can just stand behind their own line while Graham Langlands prepares himself to try and convert Reg Gasnier's try, and just ponder over what has gone wrong with their game in this first 30 or 32 minutes. Graham Langlands has landed 2 goals, and he's coming in for his 6th attempt at goal. His scoring average not particularly brilliant, but the ball is a bit slippery. Here's his kick. Oh, way to the left of the post that time. Flagged away, and so the scores remain Australia 13, New Zealand 7, with about 8 minutes to go to half-time. Well, New Zealand, naturally enough, look a little bit puzzled. The Australian back line, which last week, as far as the New South Wales side at least, functioned pretty well too, is today firing well. But worse for the New Zealanders, the Australian forwards are beating them at their own game. There's the kick which Tutty knocked behind him, picked up by Thompson for Australia, and tackled underneath by Castle, the New Zealand lock forward and captain. Played to Kelly, went off his boot forward, goes to Smith to Raper. Tries to carve a way through, but they were well taken by O'Neill. Comes to Kelly, feeds it away to Smith, he's well taken, sold him a bit of a dump in fact, and Kelly having a little bit of a don't argue there with Tatana. Goes back to Gallagher, straight into the New Zealand forwards, taken beautifully there by Danielson and knocked him back for his troubles. That was the last tackle against Australia, and so we'll have a scrum packed down midway between the Australian 25 and the halfway line. A penalty before the ball really gets into the scrum to Australia against the New Zealand hooker, we can only imagine from here, and a good chance for Australia to clear the line. With the ball is Langlands. He'll look for touch on the member stand touch line. That is the touch line nearest the camera position. There's his kick, which Tate just lets go, obviously, because it went into touch beautifully. No possible chance of getting that one. And coming up for the tap penalty, Irvine, number 2. Smith, Gleeson. Smith will back up now. It goes the other way to Tutty, puts his head down and barges. He's playing a pretty good game first up in his first test match for Australia, to Kelly. Straight ahead. He takes a lot of stopping. Oh, an intercept there, and New Zealand has got it back, getting onto it as O'Neill. Getting it across field that time to Dixon. But he's passed away, but Australia has regained. Gleeson gets onto it, gets it to Greaves. Gasnier outside him, can't get his pass away. Flips it back the other way, finds Raper in the centre of the mud. Gets it there to Langlands. He's got Irvine outside him. Goes inside. Irvine still in support. Tries the short kick. Look at Irvine, number 2, racing for it. Tate gets onto it beautifully. Everybody's after him, and Gleeson finally gets him. Also Gallagher, and put Tate down about 5 yards out from his own line. New Zealand are really harried here. They can't do much with the ball at all. Elwood has run it out, but he's run into a wall of trouble in the shape of Thompson. Played away that time by Baker, the winger, but a knock-on by New Zealand, but at the same time a penalty to New Zealand for Australia, all creeping up inside the 5, and the worst offender, Dennis Tutty. And so a chance now for New Zealand to clear the line, look for touch on the member stand touch line. The penalties at the moment are dead set even. Australia 5, New Zealand 5. There's the kick, which will raise the flag just outside the New Zealand 25. Tap penalty coming up for New Zealand. They seem slow today. It's a bit hard to try and compare them to last week. There's Castle, number 13, going through it. It gets it away beautifully to Elwood, but he was well covered all the way. Thompson, the tackler. Comes this time to Danielson. Straight and hard, taken by Gallagher, who tries to pick him up, but he's an immovable rock. He won't be picked up. He plays it away to O'Neill. Across that time to Dixon. Dixon trying to get a pass away, but well taken. Held up, can't get his pass clear, and he plays it to O'Neill. Clearing kick again by New Zealand. It'll go to Langlands. Oh, almost into touch, not quite. Goes beautifully inside that time. Baker still going, but dragged down from behind, but play now about 12 yards inside the New Zealand half. Kelly to Raper, Gleeson, Greaves, beats one tackle. He's still got Gasnier in support, but he's going on his own. Castle gets to him, couldn't quite get a pass away to Gasnier. Held on to it wisely so, and will play this one away as Australia's back line gets into motion again. Raper trying to go straight down the centre, flips a wild one over there to Gallagher, but he takes it well head high. Gets it to Langlands, Irvine outside him. Irvine's hemmed in there, taken by Baker. Tries to go inside, and he's still going, but eventually dragged down head on by Irvine and put down about 5 yards short. One of the New Zealanders hurt. Last tackle coming up for Australia. Goes to Kelly, who's knocked on, and we'll have a scrum packed down now about 6 or 7 yards out from the New Zealand line. Getting to his feet after being injured is Ray Snell, although he's slumped down again, a little bit shaken up, I think, from a knock on the head. And a few of the New Zealanders already were looking over at the clock to see how much longer they had to go to half-time. They've got exactly 2.5 minutes to go, and Australia is leading 13 points to 7. It could be that the ground is slowing them up a little bit, and they have taken a lot in defence. The scrums at the moment even. Australia 4, New Zealand 4, as Bob Irvine prepares to feed the scrum for New Zealand. Standing to the right of referee Pearce, it bounces straight out. Irvine will have to try that again. New Zealand desperately need this one. It's an Australian ball. Smith along the ground. Gleeson gets it on the first bounce, knocked it on, and Mr. Pearce has blown his whistle for the knock-on, and the scrum now will go down 20 yards out from the New Zealand line, and again Irvine to feed the scrum for New Zealand. As Irvine trotting across with the ball, scrum wheeling around and getting off the set mark, put in by Irvine for New Zealand. Goes away beautifully to Castle, standing out of the scrum, gets it to Baker. Baker trying to push up Irvine. He's put his foot into touch. Irvine was left stranded lying on the ground, although he'd made him at least put his foot into touch, and now the scrum will go down about 35 yards out from the New Zealand line. Again, put in by Irvine for New Zealand. Didn't get into the scrum, bounced off a prop's leg. Scrum collapsed, up again. Clock showing 2 minutes to go to half-time. And it's an Australian ball. Smith-Gleeson almost knocked it onto, but not quite. Going straight down the centre, and well covered that time by Dixon. He'll play it to Fitzsimmons. Smith, across to Greaves. Gasnier outside him, tries to beat a tackle there by Bailey. He's held around the head. Will play it, in fact, to Reg Gasnier. Raper flips a good one inside to Smith. Dodging and weaving, trying to go through. Well taken by Bob Irvine, amongst others, coming in with a high tackle. Over to Kelly, and he's got Hannigan outside him. Hannigan tries to step around the opposition, still going. Not quite into touch. Yes, he is. The flag is up, and he's put his foot into touch, only about 8 yards short of the New Zealand line. Scrum to go down, 10 yards in. Only a minute to go to half-time, with Australia leading New Zealand 13 points to 7. A New Zealand ball goes to Tate. Must kick, surely. No, he gets it away and tries to get his backs moving this time. Bailey gets it away beautifully here and finds White going through. There's the kick, everybody after it. Irvine in the foreground is racing for it, chased by Baker. Irvine will get to it first, picks it up, taken by Baker, and slammed down about 15 or 16 yards out from the Australian line. A bit shaken up, a double tackle there by New Zealand. Almost unnecessary. Goes to Greaves. Trying to barge his way. At least he makes it up to the Australian 25. Plays it to Tuddy from the dummy half, decides to run. A lot more fire now in the New Zealand game, but Tuddy has brought it out 35 yards with the last tackle coming up against Australia. Goes to Smith. Castle dives at him and puts him down well centre field. Last tackle, of course, against Australia, and so the scrum to go down midway between the Australian 25 and the halfway line. Scrum still even at 6 apiece, with only a second or so to go to half-time. With the ball is Irvine for New Zealand, a New Zealand ball to Elwood. Swings it the other way. That time finds Tate, the full-back, back inside, finds Bailey, taken by Gasnier and slammed down as the half-time hooter goes in the background. And at half-time, Australia leads New Zealand 13 points to 7, and for Australia, 3 tries have been scored, 1 each by Ken Irvine, Reg Gasnier and Les Hannigan, and 2 goals kicked by Graham Langlands. And for New Zealand, a beautiful try scored by right winger Roy Christian, and 2 goals kicked by fullback Roger Tate. As the players leave the field at half-time, a very interesting second half coming up, but Australia, from our vantage point, appearing to be in the box seat. Ready now. Ready now for the kick-off in the second half, and of course in this second half New Zealand in the white shorts are running left to right. Mr. Pierce signals time on. Rubber kick goes to Gallagher for Australia, number 11. Tackled well by Castle. Put down midway between the Australian 25 and the halfway line. Plays it to Kelly, number 13. Goes behind Thompson, manages to go back and fall on it just outside his own 25. Playing it to Fitzsimmons. Tutty. Dumming, trying to go through, and he's almost clear, not quite. Eventually tackled there by Tatana. Plays it to Fitzsimmons. Smith, dummy towards Kelly, gets it over here beautifully to Hannigan. He's hemmed in, he'll have to go infield, and there he goes. He's got Smith in support. Smith comes infield again, gets it to Gallagher. Where's the support? Get a low, goes behind Thompson, loose on the ground. Christian going for it, couldn't quite get to it. Picked up eventually by Kelly, Gleeson, Greaves, and he's got Irvine waiting for him over there, but back inside to Gasnier. Gasnier's flying, gets it back to Gleeson. Gleeson going for the line, he must go in for a try. Oh, what a magnificent try for Australia. Right across field in a movement that started deep in the Australian half. Well, that's left a trail of New Zealand defenders lying right across the field, and I'm sure that has completely demoralised the visitors. They're trying hard, but today I'm afraid they're a little bit out of their depth, if that's any indication of their lack of cover defence. Australia now goes to a lead of 16 points to 7 over New Zealand, with the attempted conversion by Graham Langlands to come. Johnny Gleeson, the try scorer, and after a movement in which I'm sure at least 7 or 8 players had handled the ball. This is Graham Langland's 7th attempted goal. He's only landed 2, but he's had some pretty difficult ones to try and put over, and this one is no easier. It's only about 10 yards or so in from touch. And with the ball being a little bit greasy, the field is not heavy or muddy or anything like it, but the field has enough water and enough mud in various patches for the ball to get fairly heavy and very quickly. Langland's ready now as he comes in. It's Australia 16, New Zealand 7 in the air. And it's gone to the right of the posts. No goal. The scores remain Australia 16, New Zealand 7. Mr. Pearce, referee, comes back to the mud patch, which is the centre of the halfway line. The ball has been kicked there to Elwood, the New Zealand 5'8", ready to kick off, and looks as though he'll kick it over towards the scoreboard corner. Fairly long one, and it'll go to Langlands. Takes it just inside his own 25. Running hard, straight down the centre. Tackled well underneath by Bob Irvine. Will get up and play it to Fitzsimmons. Smith outside. Now Gallagher comes through on the burst. Straight ahead, trying to draw men. Gets it away to Greaves. Greaves is well taken there by White. Trying to wrestle his way through, but White has him well covered. He plays it to Fitzsimmons. Raper. Tutty picks it up beautifully. A low one. Gets it to Gasnier. And he's got Irvine outside him. Going hard. He's got Baker to beat. Dummy's there. Over to Irvine. Irvine's going to come inside, but he's well taken. Baker gets him. He's put down only about 20 yards short of the New Zealand line. Good play by Australia. The back line working like a machine as it comes over here to Kelly, running very hard across field. Back inside, that time to Fitzsimmons, who's put down centre field and about 20 yards out. All Australia at the moment. Knock on, though, has been called, and the scrum to go down centre field just inside the New Zealand 25. Scrum to be fed by Bob Irvine, and a penalty before the ball goes into the scrum against the Australian front row. A chance now for New Zealand to get the ball further away from their line. The ball has been thrown to Tate, and he'll be looking for touch by the look of it on the far touch line, that is the scoreboard touch line. And Irvine's underneath it, tries to knock it back infield, but as you can see, it beat him a bit too high. And the tap penalty now to be taken by New Zealand. See if they can do anything with it. Tatana trying to barge his way through. They're about 6 yards short of the halfway line. Comes to Castle. Dummies and looks for a bit of support. Decides to go on his own. He makes it up pretty well right to the middle of the field and right on the centre of the halfway line. And a penalty again against Australia, all creeping up inside the 5 for New Zealand. Unfortunately, a bit too far out for a shot at goal. Tate is coming up, and he'll now look for touch on the near side touch line, the members stand touch line. Play about 5 minutes old in this second half. Australia leading New Zealand 16 points to 7. Underneath it, Hannigan, but he, again, watching it very carefully, misjudged it. It actually made touch very safely. Tap penalty being taken by O'Neill. Gets it away beautifully this time to Danielson, straight ahead, but well taken. Thompson, number 10, one of the tacklers. Also Kelly. Playing at that time to O'Neill, getting it away well. A bit of a dummy. Eventually it goes through beautifully to Dixon, going straight and hard. He's made it up to within about 3 yards of the Australian line. Playing it now to O'Neill. Goes through beautifully this time to Danielson, for New Zealand. Elwood across to Tate up as extra man. Errol back inside that time, and they're finding Christian going hard for the line, but he's put down about 12 yards short. That was the last tackle against New Zealand, and so the scrum to go down about 12, 13 yards out from the Australian line. New Zealand get the ball. They seem to have a little bit more fire in this early part of the second half. We've only seen about 6 minutes play. It's an Australian ball, though, and Australia in possession, trying to run it out. Comes to Tutty. He's a King's Cup rower, actually plays rugby league as an amateur. Goes to Gallagher, straight down the centre. Didn't make any ground at all. Fitzsimmons now, the hooker. Throws a long one back to Langlands. There's the kick to get Australia out of trouble. It'll come over here to Christian. Picks it up beautifully, slipping in the mud as Hannigan comes at him. Hannigan gets to him, and Greaves comes in, also helps put him down right in the middle of the mud. Played away by Tate. Gets it over there to Irvine, kicking for the line. It'll probably beat everybody, and it does. And the flag has gone up right on the Australian 25. Scrum to go down on that spot, and it'll be Billy Smith, the Australian halfback, to feed the scrum. Scrums and penalties pretty even as it goes to Elwood. A long one over here to Tate, coming up as extra man. This time he finds going through with it White, who's smashed down. Now it'll come across to Bailey with a bit of luck. Intercept by Hannigan. He's not quite clear. Steps around Christian, still going loose on the ground. Smith tries to get onto it, but the knock-on has been called. I think no. New Zealand has possession. The advantage rule played away by Irvine across that time to Dixon, going straight and hard. Well taken. He'll get up and play it to Elwood. Castle outside him, inside to Castle, who comes around from behind him. Well taken by Kelly, also by Gallagher. Castle getting to his feet just inside the Australian 25. Here's a shot at field goal, which doesn't look too bad. Mr. Pearce has said no, it went to the right of the posts. And so Australia faced with a 25 dropout. And even though New Zealand have come back into the fight quite a bit in the early part of the second half, Australia still looks pretty safe. Langland's taking the 25 dropout. Goes to Irvine, the New Zealand halfback, running it up towards the halfway line. Tuddy comes at him, gets him around the legs beautifully and puts him down. Plays it to number 12, Sinnell, getting it away well. It'll come over this time to Tatana, going through hard. Smash tackle that time by Raper. New Zealand are doing a lot of throwing the ball about, but they're not making any real forward progress, and every time they do appear to break clear, the Australian cover defence is always waiting. This is Castle. The cover defence again coming over. Kelly with a high tackle. He gets 2 men at once virtually. Christian, the last man, after he first of all stopped Castle in his tracks. That was the fourth tackle against New Zealand, and so the scrum to go down about 6 or 7 yards inside the Australian half. Scrum still even, 7 apiece. Smith to feed the scrum for Australia. Scrum fairly steady, and it's an Australian ball. Smith juggling it, gets it though to Gleeson. Gasnier, got Greaves outside him, back to Gleeson. Greaves now, over towards Irvine. And Greaves has broken clear. Irvine is being held back there. The referee missed it, I think. It wouldn't have made much difference, I suppose, because Greaves is well covered, but Irvine was definitely held back. A bad piece of play by New Zealand. Greaves from the dummy half, trying to go on his own. Plays it to Irvine. Smith, Gleeson, Thompson. Around the edge of the ruck, running back over towards the wing. Gets it back to Greaves, then across to Irvine. A long one over there to Tuddy. An Australian players are being held without the ball. Tuddy now going straight down the centre of the field, eventually tackled by Dixon. Will get up and play it on the New Zealand 25. Comes to Kelly. Gasnier, Langlands, Hannigan outside him. Well taken, flips it back though inside to Gleeson, who's well covered. Won't go down with it. He's actually taken there by Irvine. That's the last tackle against Australia, and the scrum to go down now on the New Zealand 25. I think that there could be a little bit of rough stuff if New Zealand continues with this spotting tactic business. There's a penalty to New Zealand against Australia, apparently pushing New Zealand off the mark. Some of the New Zealand players getting too wary now. The New Zealand backs are starting to come up and hold on to some of the players before they get the ball and hold them back if there is a breakthrough. It's the sort of stuff that invariably leads to a little bit of rugged action. That penalty coming up for New Zealand with the ball at the moment is O'Neill, the New Zealand hooker. Gets it to Castle. Draws the man well, gets his pass away beautifully to Dixon, but he's put down just inside the Australian half. The Australian defence comes up very quickly. Oh, loose ball now. New Zealand just manages to get to it. It goes out to Christian. Well taken. He couldn't do anything with it other than just go down in the tackle. Taken underneath by Smith and also by Thompson, by Smith and also by Kelly. Castle feeding it away this time. Gets it there to Elwood. Loose along the ground. Goes to, no, not quite to Irvine. Goes to Greaves. Greaves is put down. Taken by Elwood. He'll get up and play it to Irvine. 15 yards inside the Australian half. Raper. A fairly quiet time in the second half. Goes back to Smith. Running wide across field to Tutty. Bit of a gap coming up. He can get an overhand pass away, but couldn't quite manage it. Well put down. We'll get up and play it to Graham Langlands, just inside the New Zealand half. Smith. Gasnier. Gleeson. Trying to step around. That time coming through for the tackle, Dixon. Australia always throwing it about. Raper now. Over to Kelly. He's got Irvine outside him. Flips it back though. It could have been an intercept by New Zealand, I think. We'll see in a moment, but was the fourth tackle in any case. And so the scrum to go down now midway between the New Zealand 25 and the halfway line with 12 minutes gone in the second half and Australia leading New Zealand 16 points to 7. Scrum a little bit unsteady, a little bit too close to the touchline too perhaps, and Mr. Pearce waves them back in. With the ball is Irvine for New Zealand. And it's an Australian ball if he can hurry. Loose on the ground. I don't know who got that one. Everybody wants it. I think Smith got it. Smith does it. No, it's a New Zealand ball, but the New Zealand player hitting the ball that time was in an offside position. Of course, that was I think, Danielson. And so a penalty to Australia awarded midway between the New Zealand 25 and the halfway line. Mr. Pearce signals for the New Zealand player to go back and retrieve the ball, as he should, and Castle, in fact, the New Zealand skipper, comes across and picks it up. He wasn't the New Zealand player at fault. The ball is thrown to Graham Langlands, who is not interested in goal, looks for touch on the scoreboard touchline. The flag goes up about 2 yards inside the New Zealand 25, and with the ball is Ken Irvine. Tap penalty to Smith. Gleeson, Smith will back up, but a dummy there that time to Thompson. Cross to Fitzsimmons. Running pretty wide, but well taken. The Australian attack that time a little bit slow. Played to Gallagher from the dummy half. He's decided to run, and he's almost through. It's a wild pass back to Kelly. Kelly backs up well, though, and has brought play up to within about 6 yards of the New Zealand line. Smith. Gleeson steps around one man, no support. He's doing too much on his own, I think, when they get close to the New Zealand line. Last tackle coming up for Australia. There could be a shot at field goal as it goes to Raper. From the dummy half, decides to run on his own, throws one along the ground to Gallagher. Gallagher straight and hard there, gets it to Gleeson. Smith, a long one to Hannigan, gets it beautifully. Puts it there to Greaves. Greaves is going for the corner, puts it back inside. It's gone over the New Zealand line, but it would have been a knock-on by Gasnier, who backed up. New Zealand have not forced the ball with it as Tate. Now he's got to ground the ball behind his own line, and so a line drop out for New Zealand. Almost another Australian try there as Gasnier backed Greaves up beautifully, but the wild pass thrown by Greaves, who was held, bounced off his shoulder, I think, over the New Zealand line. Line drop out for New Zealand. And territorially, it's been an Australian test. Let's forget the score. Gasnier has to let that one go. Beats Raper, eventually picked up by Hannigan. Hannigan's about 15 yards inside his own half, now into New Zealand territory. Beats one man, still going, and beats another man, but eventually brought down beautifully by Danielson, and they're about 35 yards out from the New Zealand line. Again, all Australia. Goes to Gleeson. Greaves outside him. Then he gets it beautifully to Langlands, and he's got Irvine outside him. Langlands going on his own, almost into touch, gets it to Irvine over the line. Mr. Pearce, though, has said penalty, forward pass there. And New Zealand can live again. Irvine over the line, you could see him reaching out and placing the ball one-handed, but the forward pass ruled, and rightly so. And so New Zealand now, with the penalty kick, will at least be able to gain some distance and get play away from their line. And Australia now is starting to wear out the turf at each end of the field when they get close to the New Zealand line. New Zealand rarely in the first half, and so far not at all in the second half, have been anywhere near the Australian line. Trying to run it through. This time getting a pass away beautifully was Tatana, flipping it back, and a bit of a kick that time, which won't reach touch. It'll go to Langlands. Langlands inside the New Zealand half, might even kick himself. Gets it to Smith down the touchline, comes inside, but well taken. He'll get up and play this one about 35 yards out. Kelly. And a penalty this time to Australia. New Zealand all offside in the back line. Bailey and also White, the main offenders. And a penalty awarded pretty well on the mark of White, I think, who was the main offender. And Gasnier now is coming up to take the ball. Interesting to see whether he'll have a shot at goal. No, they're giving it to Ken Irvine. Ken Irvine has come across as his first shot at goal in this match. Graham Langlands has not had much of a day. He's had 7 attempts at goal and has only landed 2. And Ken Irvine, who will always live in memory for his memorable kick in the third test, 1962, against Great Britain on this ground, when he saved the third test for Australia, although at that stage he wasn't a recognised goal kicker, has placed this one about 27 yards out from the New Zealand line, about 20 yards in from touch, a pretty good sort of an angle. And as he comes in, ready to get himself positioned for a kick, Australia is leading New Zealand 16 points to 7. Irvine, international winger from the North Sydney club. Not a bad sort of a kick, and no, it's gone to the left of the post, swung away at the last moment. No points for that one, and the scores remain at Australia 16, New Zealand 7, and a 25 dropout coming up for New Zealand. There it goes from Elwood, a deep one. Langland's waiting for it, just inside or just outside his own 25. Might even kick from here. No, he decides to run. Goes beautifully inside. Danielson still going, gets it to Hannigan. Hannigan going for the corner, gets it back inside to Langlands. Langlands must go in and score for Australia over the line. Oh, what a beautiful piece of backing up by Graham Langlands, who got that ball, if you remember, just outside his own 25. ran it up inside New Zealand territory, got a pass to Hannigan, who ran about 20 yards, and then backed up Hannigan, who threw the inside pass for Langlands to score. And so Australia now has gone further ahead and leads New Zealand 19 points to 7, with the attempted conversion to come. And again, it will be Ken Irvine coming across. This will be his second attempt. The last one missed, naturally enough. This one is in pretty well the same spot, but of course much closer to the touchline, about 11 yards in from touch. And if Ken Irvine can get this one over, it'll take Australia over the 20 mark. At the moment, they lead New Zealand 19 points to 7, and Graham Langlands, with 2 goals, has now scored his first try. And Australia, to show their complete superiority in this test, have scored 5 tries to 1, and I think that really tells the story. New Zealand, far from disgrace. They're trying hard, but today I'm afraid they are a little bit outclassed. Ken Irvine ready, on just inside the New Zealand 25, about 11 yards in from touch. Follow the flight of this one perfectly, but it's gone badly to the right of the posts. Again, no points, and the scores remain at Australia 19, New Zealand 7, with 22 minutes to go to full time. Kick from the halfway line for New Zealand now to recommence play. And it'd be gratifying, if nothing else, to see New Zealand score one more try. I think it'll do their morale a lot of good for the remaining 2 tests in Australia. There's the kickoff, which again won't find touch. Goes to Thompson. Tutty decides to go through the New Zealand pack. That time they were waiting for him, put down by Castle. Goes to Thompson, straight ahead with the headgear. You can't miss him, barging. Castle trying to steal the ball. Fitzsimmons getting it to Kelly. Kelly dummies towards Smith, loose on the ground, picked up by Raper, in fact, goes to Gallagher. Gallagher gets it to Tutty. Tutty straight down the centre, beats one high tackle, gets it away to Greaves. Over here this time to Gasnier. Gasnier's got hanging it outside him. He's trapped though, and he'll be bundled, not quite into touch, but down, and a wild punch that misread Gasnier. Up goes the flag from the touch judge. Mr. Pearce just gave a caution in running. We notice while play continues that Dennis Tutty is injured and is slumped down on the ground behind the play. In the meantime, the touch judges come in, and so the play will be held up, first of all, while Dennis Tutty receives first aid treatment. He ran into a very high tackle by New Zealand, and of course there'll be the caution handed out to the New Zealand player. But Dennis Tutty, now number 9 for Australia, having a good time for his first appearance in a test match for Australia, but so far has been a ball distributor more than anything else, but still has more than held his weight. But now he's earned some sort of a souvenir of his first test match, and that is a pretty decent sort of a bump on the head. But he'll be back on his feet in just a moment. And on this sort of performance, it'll be a bit hard to see Dennis Tutty displaced, perhaps, if he can keep on running as he has done so far in this first test against New Zealand. Quite okay now, back on his feet. The caution has been handed out to the New Zealand player. It was a pretty minor offence, a wild sort of a punch that missed by at least a foot. And the scrum now to go down midway between the New Zealand 25 and the halfway line, and it'll be Irvine to feed the scrum for New Zealand. New Zealand ball now to Elwood, but a long one back the other way to Tate. Tutty comes at him and misses him. Gasnier comes in and takes him head on, puts him down about 15 yards short of the halfway line in New Zealand territory. New Zealand using barging tactics which worked last week against New South Wales, but this week just isn't working at all. They seem a little bit slow too, and the Australian defence moves up so quickly. The New Zealand attack just doesn't seem ever to get a chance to move properly. This time Australia is caught offside, and a chance now for New Zealand to gain a bit of distance, with Tate looking for touch on the member stand touchline. May not even go for the line. It's in the air, and it'll find touch all right. And the flag goes up midway between the Australian 25 and the halfway line. A tap penalty taken by O'Neill for New Zealand goes to Castle, number 13. A dummy with a long one over there that time, and a crash tackle. Beautiful bit of defence by Reg Gasnier, which again stopped the New Zealand attack in its stride. Played away by Irvine, and again Australia all creeping up inside the 5. This penalty awarded midway between the Australian 25 and the halfway line, and now New Zealand starting to get a little bit of a bounty in penalties. They're leading Australia in the penalties 11-7. No use going for goal, of course, so Tate looks for touch on the scoreboard touchline. Irvine gets underneath it, as racing through for it was Baker, but it's into touch and the tap penalty. Oh no, apparently there's a scrum to pack down as Irvine did get his hands to the ball. I thought he'd missed it for a moment. It's an Australian ball, but Mr. Pearce didn't like it. Scrum packing down again after Irvine had touched that ball before it got into touch. Scrum wheeling around. It's a little bit unsteady, to say the least. Mr. Pearce has walked completely around it, circumnavigated it. Now he seems a bit happier. And it's a New Zealand ball, and it's Irvine diving on it. They're about 20 yards out from the Australian line. A good attacking position, but a wild sort of a pass. Goes out this time to White. White gets it to Bailey along the ground. Everybody's after it, but it just goes into touch, and so they've gone from one side of the field to the other without making any real forward progress. And as this scrum gets ready to pack down, interesting to note that the scrums have held even right through. Australia 9, New Zealand 9. Scrum to be fed by Billy Smith, number 7, and the New Zealand side of things collapsing. New Zealand might be able to do something with it if only they can get it out snappily. And it's another New Zealand ball. Back the other way to Castle, but Castle's caught before he can get any sort of speed up. Tackled by Smith. Played away by Christian to Irvine, Elwood. Bailey with an inside pass there to Tate coming up from the fullback position. Kelly takes him beautifully, and underneath the tackler was Thompson. He's marked by Kelly. This is Tate, the New Zealand fullback, getting to his feet and playing it. Out along the back line to Castle. New Zealand doing a lot of running across field, but not getting anywhere. This is Wayne White, the centre, going across field. In fact, I'd say they lost a couple of yards as the fourth tackle came up, and the scrum to go down centre field on the Australian 25. The attendance posted at the cricket ground of 33,416. And I'd say only the weather has kept the crowd down to this figure. I'm sure if it had been a bright sunny day, we would have seen a 40,000 crowd. It's an Australian ball. Smith with it, runs the blind side, gets it to Raper, breaking quickly. Goes behind Gasnier, but he picks it up, has to run back the other way, dummies. Where will he go? He flips a pass to Smith. He's caught badly there by Castle and doesn't quite go down. Raper gets it to Gallagher. Running over towards the member stand touchline inside to Gasnier, and he's got Hannigan with him. Flips it back the other way, finds Tutty. Tutty, he'll have to get rid of it. He's caught, gets it away to Fitzsimmons. He's going to back up Fitzsimmons, can't get rid of the ball, though, and he's put down in the centre of the mud patch. Last tackle coming up, just inside the New Zealand half. Goes to Gleeson. Dummying and carving his way through, and he's not quite clear. Didn't quite make it before he was tackled by Tatana, and that was the last tackle against Australia, and so the scrum to go down midway between the New Zealand 25 and the halfway line. 33,416 are watching this first test at the Sydney Cricket Ground, and Australia leading New Zealand 19 points to 7. Fed by Irvine for New Zealand, a New Zealand ball. Goes to Elwood. And this is the winger Baker coming in, getting it away to Baker, and then this is Bailey going through, flips it back inside, but a wild sort of a pass that eventually is picked up, goes back to Christian, the winger. Knock-ons galore, but the advantage goes Australia's way, and Irvine playing it there to Smith to Raper. Raper trying to go through. Bad handling there by New Zealand, and Australia has got the advantage after they knocked it on. Smith tried to dummy his way through, but he's well covered and tackled underneath that time by Sunil. Fitzsimmons across to Gleeson, along the ground to centre Greaves, who's kicked it forward. Everybody after it. I think it'll beat everybody. No, not. Yes, the flag has gone up. Irvine racing through for it, but diving onto it first was Baker. And another scrum to go down midway between the New Zealand 25 and the halfway line. The scrums now just slightly favouring New Zealand, 11 to 10. With the ball is Irvine for New Zealand, standing to the left of referee Pearce. An Australian ball, oh no, loose on the ground, and I think perhaps Irvine has dived on it, and Irvine does have it for New Zealand. Castle trying to feed his backs, getting it away to Elwood, and he's put down midway between the New Zealand 25 and the halfway line. They're going across field and back the other side, but not making any forward progress. This is Castle going through, and this time he finds Christian, Well taken, and good diving tackle from behind that time by Gasnier, who's done a tremendous amount of defence. Last tackle coming up for New Zealand. They try the kick, goes over Hannigan's head. He's racing back for it. It's now just inside the Australian 25. This is Les Hannigan, who scored a try in the first half. Over towards Langlands, who's coming up. Oh, flips it there to Langlands, almost went forward. Going across field, this is Graham Langlands, Australian fullback, trying to worm his way out of a tackle, but well put down that time by Danielson. Fitzsimmons to Raper. Back along the ground is Smith. Smith picked up, can't get a pass away. We'll get up and play this one midway between the Australian 25 and the halfway line. Kelly, Gasnier. Tutty, almost a game of basketball. Tutty almost found the gap that time, not quite, and tackled from behind by Dixon, who followed him across. Gleeson to Thompson. Greaves, back to Thompson. Kelly, Gallagher straight down the centre, still looking for a gap. Smith this time, and here is the gap, and he's flying. Looks for support. He's got Raper there. Finds Johnny Raper, and he's got Irvine coming up in support. He's gone the wrong way, I think, but flips it over there. It's found Fitzsimmons along the ground, and dived on by Australia. Comes out to Irvine. Irvine's going to fly for the corner, gets it into Hannigan, who appears to have blown his whistle anyway. And the knock-on has been called as the Australians, and apparently the Australians must be caught this time for playing it off the ground. The player was down. The crowd followed the player all the way through. It was a certain try for Australia, morally, let's say, but the rule had been breached further back, and so the penalty does go to New Zealand for the Australian player playing it off the ground. Tate has it for New Zealand, looking for touch on the members' stand touchline. Taken by Hannigan. Gasnier. Going in field. Thompson, he'll probably back him up. A dummy by Thompson, straight down the centre, pushing off players. Gets it beautifully there to Raper, going straight ahead, but put down by a wall of defenders about 11 yards short. He's going to play it to Gasnier. Smith outside him, and there's Smith, number 7. Then goes past Gleeson, picked up by Greaves. Greaves trying to step around the opposition, but put down well. Australia in an attacking position here could go in. Smith, Gasnier, Tutty, gets it on his fingertips. Langlands, and he's got Hannigan outside him, flying for the corner, and in he goes for a magnificent try in the corner. And Australia puts another 3 points on the board. Australia 22, New Zealand 7. The last try scored by Les Hannigan, who's now scored 2 tries in this test debut for Australia. A very proud Les Hannigan, former country player from the South Coast, who's had a mixed day. He scored 2 tries, has made a couple of mistakes, but still that's to be expected in the first test or any game for that matter. And of course, he did let in Christian, the New Zealand player, for New Zealand's only try. But don't take anything away from Hannigan. He's played a magnificent game. His second try of the match. Australia 22, New Zealand 7, with 12 minutes to go to full time. And Ken Irvine now to try to convert Hannigan's second try from pretty well right on the touchline. This will be his 3rd attempt, and so far he hasn't landed any goals at all. He has scored a try, of course. And this one is a very, very acute angle, as you can see from our picture, because it's right on the New Zealand 25 and right on the touchline. So it's a very narrow view of the uprights, and it'll be an excellent kick if Ken Irvine can manage it. As he prepares himself for the kick, Australia 22, New Zealand 7, and Australia by far the better side, of course, having scored 6 tries to 1. Here comes Irvine with that peculiar shuffle. In the air, but this time sadly to the left. No points for that. The scores remain at Australia 22, New Zealand 7. Play to recommence with New Zealand kicking off from the halfway line. They've put up a good show, but they're unfortunately outclassed today, and I think we'll have to see a lot of changes for their future test teams in Australia. Elwood takes the kick-off for New Zealand. Just barely goes the required 10 yards, and it goes to Gallagher, who knocked it behind him. Lots of players diving for it. And we'll see now. New Zealand has it, I think. New Zealand getting up, have possession midway between the Australian 25 and the halfway line. Tutty, number 9, in for that tackle. And Australia still moving up deadly in their defence. This time a little bit too deadly, of course. Caught offside, and a penalty to New Zealand centre field about 30 yards out. That's 13 penalties to New Zealand and only 7 to Australia.
Up in the air this time. Let's see if they can do anything with it. Langland's underneath it, calls for it, takes it beautifully too, about 5 yards out, caught by Castle. He'll have to play the ball about 5 yards out from his own line. Goes to Smith, Tutty, straight down the centre, tries to barge his way that time through White, but White manages to make him stumble. He'll get up and play it to Fitzsimmons. 15 yards out. Oh, New Zealand moving up a little bit too quickly that time. Goes to Gallagher. Kelly, oh, he's trying to barge off those New Zealand players. And the last tackle is coming up for Australia. Playing it to Fitzsimmons, the Australian hooker. Smith, Thompson running very wide. Tries to beat a diving tackle that time by Snell, but he's dragged down. We'll get up and play this one, or rather the tackle, I should say, will go down about 20 yards out after the fourth tackle was registered against Australia. And the clock now showing only 8 minutes to go to full time, with Australia with the test in the bag, leading New Zealand 22 points to 7. With the ball is Irvine for New Zealand, the scrum almost on the ground as he puts it in, and a penalty to New Zealand. Loose arm there by Australia. Well, there's hardly any use, of course, going for goal. Tate is coming up to take the ball for New Zealand. And I'd recommend he just, well, it'll be an up and under again. Up she goes. Not a bad one this time, and this time it's Smith going for it. And, oh no, Langland's again got it. Langland's got it for Australia, and Raper also after it, making sure that Langland's goes down all right. He wasn't going to let him stay up there and take any unwelcome punishment. He plays it to Raper, and from the dummy half straight through he goes. Makes it out about 15 yards. He'll play it to Smith, right in front of the Australian post. Raper a bit slow to get up too after that tackle. A bit knocked about, I think. It goes out to Kelly, running wide of the ruck. Dragged down about 20 yards out from the Australian line.
Well, the score now has gone along to Australia 22, New Zealand 10. A try has been scored for New Zealand by their front row forward, Oscar Danielson. And now we're seeing Roger Tate preparing the ball right on the Australian 25, trying to convert Danielson's try, which could bring the score up to Australia 22, New Zealand 12. We have only 5 minutes to go to full time. This is Roger Tate, who so far has landed 2 goals from 3 attempts. Not bad kicking for a game such as this with a greasy ball. There's his kick, which has gone to the left of the posts, and so the scores remain at Australia 22, New Zealand 10. The last scorer for New Zealand was Oscar Danielson, prop forward. Good try in the corner, and Tate's attempted conversion missed. 5 minutes to go to full time. Australia 22, New Zealand 10. And Australia now to recommence play with the kick from the halfway line, placing the ball as Smith, but probably Langlands will come through and take the kick, and there he goes. A deep one straight down the centre. Goes to Christian, who takes it about 5 yards out. Tutty coming across, but he'll beat Tutty. Thompson comes at him and bumps him, and Raper comes in, finally finishes off the New Zealand attack. New Zealand in possession about 20 yards out from their own line. Kelly coming in with a bit of high stuff there, and going down with the ball is Dixon, second row forward for New Zealand. Castle spears it away pretty well there, and that time found Tatana going through. He's pushed back for his trouble about 5 yards. We'll play this one on the New Zealand 25. Short kick ahead there by Elwood, who's knocked down for his troubles by Gasnier. There'll probably be a penalty here, and there it is against Gasnier for Gasnier getting in the road of that player, trying to follow through his own kick. And New Zealand now can look for touch almost, or naturally enough, on the scoreboard touchline. Gain a bit of distance and put themselves into an attacking position. That one has found it well. The flag has gone up about 1 yard inside the Australian half. With the ball is Colin O'Neill, the New Zealand hooker. Irvine with a short kick over everyone's head. Hannigan's racing back forward. The bounce might beat him into touch, and it does so. The flag has gone up about 35 yards out from the Australian line. The scrum to go down 10 yards in. Clock now showing 2.5 minutes to go to full time as they pack down the scrums. New Zealand has gone slightly ahead, has won the scrums 12-10. Put in by Smith for Australia, but it's a New Zealand ball to Irvine. But Mr. Pearce has blown his whistle because the scrum, the ball rather, was not thrown in correctly. Smith tries again. Not much of a tunnel there, and I wouldn't be at all surprised to see a penalty come out of this if they don't pack down correctly. That one did not get in at all, and the penalty goes to New Zealand against Billy Smith for the same problem, and that's 16 penalties to 7 New Zealand has had over Australia. Unfortunately, the vast bulk have been out of kicking distance.
They're not worried about goals now, of course, but they're interested in another try, and there's the kick for the line, which has raised the flag about 11 yards out from the Australian line. Playing the tap penalty is O'Neill. Goes across this time to Dixon, straight ahead, and he'll go in. Oh, there's a beautiful try to Dixon, the New Zealand second rower, and New Zealand have saved a little bit of face in the dying minutes of this first test at the Sydney Cricket Ground. Took the Australian pack completely by surprise, and New Zealand now have gone ahead to 13 points on the board. Australia leading New Zealand 22 points to 13 with full time about 1.5 minutes away. Tate left now with a reasonably easy attempted conversion. He's placing it just inside the Australian 25, and it's something like 20 yards in from touch. Australia 22, New Zealand 13. Interesting to run over some of these statistics now of the match. The scrums so far have gone New Zealand 13, Australia 10. The penalties have gone New Zealand 16, Australia 7. Unfortunately, the scoreboard tells an entirely different story, with Australia having scored 6 tries to 3, I should say. Tate now placing this one just inside the Australian 25. Doesn't look too bad, but it's gone to the left of the post. No points, and so the scores remain at Australia 22, New Zealand 13 for Australia. 6 tries, 2 goals, 22 points. And for New Zealand, 3 tries, 2 goals, 13 points. Full time now, 1 minute, no more away, and the game to be recommenced by the kick from the halfway line. Billy Smith looks like he'll take this one and angling it over towards the member stand touchline. A fairly short one that goes about 11 yards, no more. Goes across to Elwood, who can't do much with it. Tries to get rid of a pass, but he's swung down. There's the full-time hooter in the background, and this first test between Australia and New Zealand at the Sydney Cricket Ground is all over, and Australia has run out the winners, 22 points to 13 over New Zealand. And for Australia, tries scored by Les Hannigan, who scored 2, Ken Irvine, Reg Gasnier, Johnny Gleeson and Graham Langland. Oh, apparently we've all been taken by surprise. There's the full-time hooter. The hooter we heard before was something that resembled it. Caught Mr. Pearce by surprise too, apparently. He signalled that was the end of the game. Someone on the famous Sydney Cricket Ground hill blowing a trumpet, apparently, and took everybody by surprise. But it was so close to full time it made no difference anyway. So quickly going back over the scores, Australia 22 has defeated New Zealand 13 in this first test, June 10, 1967 at the Sydney Cricket Ground. 2 tries scored for Australia by Les Hannigan, tries also scored by Graham Langlands, Ken Irvine, Reg Gasnier and Johnny Gleeson, and 2 goals kicked by Graham Langlands. And for New Zealand, tries scored by Roy Christian, Oscar Danielson, Kevin Dixon, and 2 goals scored by Roger Tate. That's the story of the first test between Australia and New Zealand at the Sydney Cricket Ground. Australia 22, New Zealand 13.